We are just a touch late. Why are we a touch late? Well, because just as I was putting everything together, I got this insane little curveball thanks to trying to connect with Twitch. Oops. Yeah, so I've been working on this, and the show began, and I had a wonderful first segment. And I'll redo that, of course, because there are all kinds of issues that we have to talk about today, lots of them having to do with the election. But something amazing happened regarding the Supreme Court of New York. The Supreme Court of New York has done something that we need to discuss regarding COVID-19 vaccines. It is good news, and it does point on something that is absolutely ridiculous. But welcome to the Wells Report. We honestly report the news. We report the news. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We also then comment, which is not the news, and then we debate. That's what we do here on the Wells Report. And sorry for being up a little bit late, but that's what happens sometimes when you've got a technological circus going on, which is something that I'm doing reasonably well. But occasionally, from time to time, there are arguments from various sources that we stream to, and this time it was Twitch. So we bring this to you on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Rumble a little bit later on today. We still haven't figured out how to do a live broadcast on Rumble, but we'll get that done. So what has happened today? Lots and lots of election news. We'll get to that coming up a little bit later on. But meanwhile, some interesting COVID-19 news. The New York State Supreme Court has reinstated all employees who were fired for not being vaccinated. And then they ordered back pay. And the reason that they said this had to happen was because all these people had their rights violated. This is something that we commented on a lot. I spent a lot of time talking to people that had decided not to take the vaccines and lost their jobs. And I said, don't worry about this. As soon as it gets into the courts, this is all going to get reversed. And yeah, you're going to get your back pay. Well, the New York Supreme Court agreed. It has reinstated all employees who were fired for not being vaccinated, ordered back pay. The court found that being vaccinated, listen to this. The court found that being vaccinated does not prevent an individual from contracting or transmitting COVID-19. This is something we know. This is something that is part of our lives. I took the full series of Moderna, that's 2 shots, and a booster, and then got COVID-19. And now the Supreme Court of New York says, you know what? These shots did not work as intended. They may have worked at some level. When I got COVID-19, tested positive for it, I had a mild cold, and that was about it. I had a mild cold. Now, would it have been worse had I not had those vaccines? Don't know. I suspect that's the case, but I don't know, so I'm not going to say so. So, being vaccinated, according to the New York Supreme Court, does not prevent an individual from contracting or transmitting COVID-19, which means this vaccine mandate is over. And the insolence of various politicians, in this case, New York Mayor Eric Adams, who doubled down on all this, along with county administrators, county judges, governors of states, local governments, all these politicians said that if you don't get your shots, you're not going to work. They fired a lot of people. Well, guess what? This is going to sweep the nation. This is going to sweep the nation. The New York Supreme Court has put up a precedent that is going to be impossible to ignore. This blows up President Joe Biden's vaccine mandate. It blows up it blows up the United States military's vaccine mandate. It blows it up. What was bad about all of this, 1,400 employees were fired for being unvaccinated. And many of those fired were police officers and firefighters. The police officers, of course, fit the leftist agenda of reducing the police force. Well, that is not something that is going to fly, according to the New York Supreme Court. So what they're talking about here is there are all kinds of people, from the FDNY Uniform Firefighters Association president, Andrew Ansbro, and the FDNY Uniformed Fire Officers Association President James McCarthy. We're here to say we support the revocation of the vaccine mandate, the mayor announced. We think it should be extended to everybody in New York. If you're going to remove the vaccine mandate for certain people, and they did in New York for performers and athletes, if you're going to follow the science is going to tell you there isn't any danger now. Putting hundreds of firefighters, police officers, and other emergency workers out of work is not in the best interests of anyone. This is not safe. By the way, this is breaking news. This is breaking news. The New York Supreme Court has acted. Which courts will now follow their lead? You know what I suspect? I suspect every single one of them will follow the New York Supreme Court's lead. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Thanks very much for joining us. Sincerely appreciated. Back with more coming up in just a couple of moments. You stay there. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Thanks very much for joining us. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. You can call me right now, in fact. 817-379-2172. By all means, join us. It would be great for you to be here, in fact. So please do. Please do be here. That would be nice. You can also join the chat. We've been talking a little bit about the chat room, etc. It's outstanding that the New York Supreme Court reinstated jobs after jabs. Jessie, who decided that she was not going to take the vaccine, had it twice. First time was like the flu. Second time was barely a cold. Yeah. So Gary says, blow up the mandate. Let's make it a chain reaction. And I think he's got something there. I truly do. I believe that that Gary's got something there. We should blow up that mandate. It should be gone. And there are all kinds of reasons why. And so when we talk about all of this, we eventually get down to the point where political interference in healthcare has not just damaged the American society, not just cost people jobs, not just threw the entire nation into chaos, but what it's done is it's also cost people huge amounts of money. Political interference in healthcare was a bad idea when President Obama mandated it across the land. It was a bad idea when Supreme Court Justice John Roberts decided to uphold the law. It's a bad idea because this is an institution, a public institution, the United States government at every level, that has no business whatsoever having anything to do with healthcare. And it was proven beyond all doubt with COVID-19. Now, there have been huge problems with it before. Before COVID-19, there were huge problems with it. We found out that the Obamacare law was essentially fraudulent. It was written in such a way that it could be, shall we say, redefined through the process of executive orders. Remember how executive orders work. Executive orders clarify and expedite a bill that has been passed. The guy who wrote the bill was very, very happy with it. He said it was written to be incomprehensible. And what they did was, as you remember, Nancy Pelosi said, well, we've got to pass it before he can find out what's in it. There were Republicans that said, I want to see what's in the bill. And they could see what was in the bill, but they couldn't take notes. And they had to do it under a supervised circumstance. And since it was written to be incomprehensible, they came away from this going, what does this bill say? And the answer is nobody knows. And nobody knew. But as the problems propped up or cropped up with the Obamacare healthcare law, the idea was that President Obama would clarify the law with an executive order and keep doing that until something worked. That, fortunately, didn't happen. There were other things that stopped the actual implementation of Obamacare to the point where it was a mandate that the government forced on every man, woman, and child in the United States. Fast forward to COVID-19, suddenly they had the pretext to mandate medical care on every man, woman, and child in the United States. And indeed, what ended up happening was that if you did not play ball, you lost your job. Or will lose your job. And what is happening is the New York Supreme Court has now said, no, I'm sorry, the vaccines don't work. Doesn't stop you from getting COVID-19. Doesn't stop you from transmitting COVID-19. You are reinstated. You get your back pay. This is going to go through the entire nation, and it should. But what should also go through the entire nation is the idea that the government can and should do something about healthcare in the United States. There is only one thing the federal government should do regarding healthcare in the United States. Only one thing. And strangely enough, President Trump actually tried to pull it off and was turned aside. He was turned aside by a federal judge. What was that idea? To make every medical decision, every medical procedure, every medicine, make the prices of all of those things public. And Big Pharma immediately stepped in and said, no, we got to stop this because Big Pharma's ripping us off. And they always have been. The reason is because we have no idea what these medicines actually cost. We have no idea. The reason that a loaf of bread is a few dollars as opposed to $100 or $200 or $300 is because we don't have an insurance policy making sure that we are insured to have bread. That's why. That is the circumstance. Because if we had no idea what the bread price was until we went to the grocery store to buy it, and then we said, well, our copay is now $5. What would end up happening is that in order to get that copay, you'd have to pay a premium, which is what we do with our health insurance. We pay a premium. And because we buy this particular plan and so on and so forth, we supposedly get a deal on medication. Well, if that's the way we bought bread, bread would be $500. We get an explanation of bread purchase, just like you get an explanation of insurance benefits. You paid this copay. You paid this amount on your deductible. And this is how much it cost you. Let's say, $520. But if you did not have insurance, they tell you this, it would have cost you $15,000. Well, that's garbage. What we need to do in this country is we need to make all these things public. Break an arm? Well, Bill's urgent care down the street will fix your broken arm for $1,500. But then again, Murray's quick care down the other street will do it for $1,250. And this price competition will drive the prices down to the point where you have real prices. In other words, these people will say, okay, we can't treat it for any less than this, and everybody's going to the lowest possible bidder. And then they'll say, well, you can go to the lowest bidder if you want to, but what kind of care will you get? Well, you'll get the care that's mandated by the FDA, just like you do now. These are the procedures you have to do. And the thing about it is we don't have that price information. So the federal government needs to make all healthcare prices public. Pass a law, all healthcare prices will be public. And then the market will take over. And then, of course, if the big pharmaceutical companies say, hey, Bill over there at Hermione Gingold Pharmaceuticals, we don't want to charge anything less than blah, 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 blah. Well, that's called price fixing. And that's where the Federal Trade Commission can start saying you're fixing prices. That will be a $4 billion fine. You see, if you've been listening to this broadcast for any length of time, you know that I think that the federal government of the United States should operate to the benefit of the people of the United States. They do not. They operate in the interests of government first and then the big machine afterwards. The federal government of the United States should make all medical procedures, the prices of all medical procedures, public. Of all medicines, public. And then there should be the FDA overlooking that to make sure that those medicines are indeed the medicines that they bargained for and that they tested, that they are safe and effective. And market pressures will bring prices down if we know what they are. But we don't. What's the latest outcome of all of that garbage? Glad you asked. Now, this is a biased news article. This is from USA Today. Okay, the headline is How the Politics of Healthcare Could Affect the Midterm Elections and Control of Congress. Then it tells a story of Hunter Seago, who lives somewhere around Greencastle, Indiana. He's a 26-year-old graduate student. He went down to get his insulin prescription filled, found out that the prescription and the test strips, the price that he was going to pay was $1,800. $1,800? It doesn't cost $1,800 to produce a 10 milliliter vial of insulin. It just doesn't. He asked his mom, Kathy, hey, this can't be right. We have insurance, right? Kathy said, yeah, go ahead. That's normal. Pay for it. They've been struggling with the soaring cost of insulin and diabetic supplies since Hunter was first diagnosed at age 7, especially with a high deductible on their health insurance, which, by the way, was thanks to Obamacare. Hunter calls the price absolutely asinine, is rationing his insulin to stretch out his supply. And so, when Kathy saw GOP lawmakers this summer block an effort to cap insulin costs for those on private insurance, the former registered Republican decided that was enough. She was going to vote Democrat this fall. Now, this is the bias. Okay? The Republicans are not responsible for insulin at $1,800 a vial. They simply aren't. As I said, Donald Trump tried to make all these prices public and was shut down by a federal judge. And so now you're in a situation where Kathy is saying, I don't want to be so political, but this is not the Republican Party that I grew up with. Well, it's not the Republican Party that is the problem. And if USA Today would report honestly, they would say something about that, but they don't. They simply don't. Why? Well, because we're 14 days away from an election. That's why. We're 14 days away from an election, and they're doing everything they possibly can to blame Republicans for everything they possibly can to mitigate what could be a red wave throughout the entire government. They don't tell you why the Republicans voted against it, do they? No. And once again, that's the hallmark of propaganda. It's not what you add to a news story, it's what you take away. Polls suggest, and this is now the rationalization, while polls suggest the economy, abortions, and crime remain top of mind among many midterm voters, healthcare remains a motivating issue. Yeah, it's way down the list. It's way down the list. Democrats hold a commanding lead, 51% to 27% among voters who prioritize healthcare, according to a Pew Research Center survey released last Thursday. The problem for the party in power is that other issues, inflation, economy, gun violence, abortion, immigration, and climate change all rank higher. Yeah, let's see. According to a Reuters Ipsos poll, inflation is number 1, jobs and economy, number 2, gun violence, mass shootings, number 3, abortion, changing abortion laws, number 4, immigration, number 5, climate or environment, number 6. Where is healthcare? Nowhere to be seen. Why? Because it's not an issue. There are other issues, important ones. And this is the game. This is what happens when you're dealing with a machine press, a political machine press, doing everything they possibly can. The entire day's news is filled with it today. As the news, abandoning the truth and choosing political sides, are trying to massage the news in a way that makes it more palatable for people to vote for what has been shown to be failing policy after failing policy after failing policy. And so what they're working on is trying to come up with something else. My God, my goodness gracious golly gee willikers. It's healthcare and insulin prices are too high. Well, that's because people will not allow, the machine will not allow a solution to these problems. First of all, the United States government has no business in healthcare. State governments have no business in healthcare. County governments, city governments, no business in healthcare because they can't do it. Because suddenly your healthcare becomes a political issue, just like it is now. This is a perfect example of what's going wrong. Because somehow the left believes, or Democrats believe, that healthcare should be a political initiative. And for whatever reason, part of the country does not realize that none of the things that the government has tried to do has actually worked. Does anybody notice that besides me? So why in heaven's name would we entrust them with our health care if nothing that they try works? And I'm not talking about just Democrats. I'm talking about government. I'm talking about government. These are all things that we need to be aware of headed up to this election. Democrats will not pass a bill to make all healthcare procedures and all medicines, the prices of all of those, public. They won't pass that bill. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure that no politician will. Why? Well, because pharmaceutical companies give these politicians lots and lots of money. Now, is that influence buying? Yes, it's absolutely influence buying. There's no doubt about it. Should that be illegal? Yes, it should be illegal. Is it? No. But that's the difference between a government populated by people that cover their needs as opposed to a government that covers the needs of the people, which is what I believe the federal government, state government, county government, city government, that's what it should all be about. But that's not where we are. We have a chance to do something about it. But there's also something else here. This is monstrous. You know, this USA Today article is embarrassing. Inflation dominates voter headspace. Healthcare is still a top second-tier issue to voters, says Bob Blendon, a professor of health policy and political analysis emeritus at Harvard University's T.H. Chan School of Public Health. I'm sorry. Does anybody believe that Harvard is anything except a political action committee for the Democrat Party? It might be hard for most voters to isolate on rising healthcare costs when the price of other daily necessities such as food, gas, and utilities have skyrocketed. And when they do, it's all about the effect on their bank account, says Blendon. They're not interested in long-term problems. They're talking about high prices of doctor charges and pharmaceuticals. Everything is short-term. And that's true about healthcare cost issues. People are worried about paying their bills in an inflationary time. Duh. What we're trying to do is we're trying to distract you from everything else. These are simple problems to solve. The political process will not solve them. If healthcare is an issue, get the government out of it, except for one thing. Make all the prices of, and they know every single possible medical procedure and medicine. It's called coding. They have codes for everything. They know exactly what these prices are. All they need to do is make it public, and all these prices will drop like rocks. Oh yeah, it'll take a while. It'll take a while because the pharmaceutical companies will try to fix prices. If the Federal Trade Commission is actually run by people who care about the people of the United States, as opposed to whether or not their political buddies are continuing to keep the money flowing from big pharmaceutical companies, and they actually start working to the benefit of us, then what will end up happening is a lot of these guys will go to jail for price fixing. And they should. They absolutely should. But this game has gone on long enough. The government, nowhere in the Constitution does it say anything about the government having a hand in your relationship with your doctor. The government made it possible for your insurance company to be in the exam room with you and your doctor. And that was the beginning of the slippery slope we keep talking about. And why didn't we do something about that? I have no idea. Well, actually, I do have an idea. Because we keep electing the wrong people to government. The wrong people. The people we need to elect are people that should go to Washington, D.C., should go to the state capitol, should go to the county administrator, in the case of Texas, the county judge's office, and city government, Eric Adams, New York City, mind you. And they should start looking out after the people instead of their political ideologies. It is not government of, for, and by the government. It is government of, for, and by the people. I am extremely concerned about this machine political press trying to tell whatever story possible to convince as many people as possible that the Republican Party is the problem. The Republican Party isn't the problem. Inflation is the problem. That's what's the problem. The rest of this, just a political argument that's gotten out of control. We need to get our economy fixed. The people running the show can't do it. We need to replace the people running the show. And we can do something about that in 14 days, as long as you are not distracted or mystified by the razzmatazz coming out of the political machine. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with more coming up in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. While we're on the subject of a malfunctioning government, let's talk a little bit about the nation's report card. We reported on that yesterday. There are now opinion pieces coming out saying how badly we failed kids during the pandemic. Now, what do? Well, I tell you what we'll do. What we need to do is we need to get these kids into summer school for a while. Probably a couple of years will do it. And that's really all we need to do. But that's going to be a problem. Ingrid Jacques on USA Today. Picture for a minute the more than 50,000 students who attend the Detroit Public Schools Community District. It's the largest school district in Michigan. It's once again the lowest performing large school district in the country. The vast majority of the kids in the Detroit schools are Black. They come from low-income families. These are kids that can least afford to fall further behind. Yet that is exactly what's happened in the past 3 years. These students were locked out of their classrooms during the pandemic much longer than their peers in many Michigan districts and around the country. Why? I'll tell you why. It's a two-word answer. Gretchen Whitmer. She had an opportunity to suspend the Constitution, and by golly, she did it. The subheadline is not putting students first. That's right. The decisions did not put the students first. They put the teachers' union first. The latest national test scores released yesterday. Gloomy picture. You know about that. Schools still have billions of dollars in federal COVID-19 relief. The funding must be directed to help the kids catch up. Absolutely correct and true. The government of the United States is the problem. State governments are the problem. The willingness to manipulate a public health care issue for the sake of politics is the problem. The insolent mainstream media who's abandoned the truth and chosen sides from the political standpoint has become nothing more than a propaganda rag. It's one of the reasons why you're here. It's one of the reasons why you're watching this podcast, because we call it the way it is. And so what we have here, another reason to homeschool, says Jessie. She's a homeschooler. She's a homeschooler. But look at what's going on here. All these decisions, everything that we have seen, is now coming apart at the seams. The idea to throw $1.9 trillion into the United States economy on a pretext of public health has led to outrageous inflation that we're going to have to suffer for to get rid of. This insane mandate to get injections didn't work. People got fired. They're going to be reinstated. New York Supreme Court. The decisions made over COVID-19 to keep our kids out of school because the teachers didn't want the kids to expose them to COVID-19. All these are now coming home to roost. Why is that? It all comes down to the government having a place in, or at least taking control of, public health, the political process. The political process has done all of this to us. And it all comes right back to COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2, all of it. This is what happens when you abandon the Constitution of the United States. This is what happens when politics becomes more important than reality. Politics more important than truth. Truth. All of it. And once again, I'm not talking about a particular political party. I'm talking about the government. That's what I'm saying. All the rest of this is just arguing who gets the blame. Well, I have to go back to an old Japanese manufacturing philosophy. It's time to fix the problem, not fix the blame. How do you fix the problem? Get the government of the United States out of healthcare. Instead of forcing the CDC to report the political initiative, the political imperative, the political ideologies, the political decisions should be driven by the CDC. The CDC can't do that if it's a political organization, which it is now. In other words, the government is screwing this up by the numbers, from soup to nuts. You know, I listen to people that are partisans and say, you know, the Democrats this, the Democrats that, Democrats have screwed this up, the Democrats have screwed that up, so on and so forth. The Republicans just haven't had a chance to screw it up. Believe me, they will. And the reason is because we keep electing Democrats and Republicans. It's getting so bad that even Liz Cheney said, you know, if the Republican Party doesn't get its crap together, there's going to be a conservative party. Yeah. Yeah, I've been talking about it for years. All of this is coming apart. And why is it coming apart? Because all of this was wrong from the beginning. All of it. And I am proud to be able to say that we figured it out first here on the Wells Report. We'll be back with more next hour. Thanks for being with us. Stay put. So anyway, thanks again. Sorry about the technical glitches there in that first hour. We'll be right back with more. See North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. What do we do here? We report the news, honestly. And man, is it tough. It's really tough. Why? Well, because there's an election in 14 days. That's why. So what we have now is we have a mainstream media that has abandoned the truth, chosen political sides, and is flooding your headspace with propaganda. As it is biased left, the mainstream media biased left. This is left-wing propaganda. And so what we do in our honest reporting of the news is try to de-propagandize the news. It is not easy. We report the news. We analyze it for fact and bias. We point that out. I make commentary. We debate. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. Every single day, Monday through Friday at least. Here on this channel. Please keep it handy. And if you find value in it, make sure you subscribe in whatever platform that you happen to be seeing it on. Subscribe to the broadcast. It's a good one, if I dare say so myself. And so, as we come to this, I have a whole bunch of election news. I have gubernatorial debates. I have all manner of outrage with regard to campaign workers being attacked. I have all of these things that are being reported, mystifying leftist media for, oh my God, the realities are coming home. I'm going to go through all of that with you. And unfortunately, that is the news of the day. You know, a lot of people look at this show and they say, man, this is a political show. You're just a right-wing dude. I'm not. I'm an American dude. I believe the Constitution comes before politics. As a matter of fact, I think that politics is damaging the Constitution every single day. And that's not a partisan statement. That is a bipartisan statement. And it is something that you and I have a chance to do something about in 14 days. But in order to do that, you have to have the truth. I'll do the best I can. But if you believe there's something else that needs to be discussed, or if you think I'm getting something wrong in my analysis of this propaganda as we try to rebuild some kind of reasonable news out of it, by all means, call me, 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. You can also join the chat room. Please, by all means, do it. Do it. So in case you missed it last hour, we discussed what John Beale is pointing out, which is this. New York Supreme Court reinstates all employees fired for being unvaccinated and orders back pay. That is the beginning of a reality avalanche when we discuss, and we did discuss, a government that is absolutely out of control. Out of control based on COVID-19. Everything we're dealing with here goes right back to COVID-19. And note that I'm not saying those evil Democrats. I'm saying government. The government ham-fisted this from the beginning. And it was a mistake. And now we're living with those mistakes. Inflation. Kids that did not go to school for 3 years, failing. All of these things. It's just outrageous. And this is what happens when you have a government that operates to its own benefit, as opposed to operating to the benefit of the people of the United States. They serve us, not the other way around. And so now we find this 14-day panic on the part of the mainstream media trying to explain the unexplainable, trying to defend the indefensible, trying to deflect blame to the other side. And that's not what news is supposed to be. News is supposed to inform you so you can make real decisions. And that's what we do here. It's not supposed to be a political show, but by golly, it's hard not to be when you see so many political malfunctions trying to be explained by a mainstream media that's only a part of the machine, as opposed to an actual an actual institution, the fourth estate, in fact, that is here on a constitutional mandate to be skeptical of government as opposed to trying to explain why the government is right and you are wrong. We have a lot of work to do, and it starts in 14 days, unless you voted early, in which case, I hope you voted what you think is the best, whatever it is, whether it agrees with what I think or whether it doesn't. We, the people of the United States, own this country. Regardless of your political party, the government is malfunctioning. We better do something about it, or they're going to keep malfunctioning. I'm afraid that the people that came up with all this wonderful gobbledygook regarding the use of COVID-19 as a political tool, I'm worried that they're going to think up something else. What else are they going to do? Well, here's what I want them to do. I want them to be retired. I want them to be retired at the hand of your vote. Not as a partisan exercise, but as an American one. In Florida, they had a debate. Charlie Crist is a Democrat who's trying to do whatever he possibly can to explain the unexplainable. He's going to get crushed by Ron DeSantis. But here's how USA Today reported that they have come up with 5 things that they think are the important takeaways. Democrat Charlie Crist knew that last night's TV debate was probably his last chance to try to get close to Republican Governor Ron DeSantis. So he started talking about what else? He's going to start talking about abortion. DeSantis did not rise to the bait. He did repeatedly work over the hour to link his Democrat opponent to President Joe Biden, who is unpopular in most polls. DeSantis cited the Biden-Crist energy policies for raising gas prices, the Biden-Crist economy for inflation, and the Democrats shared in what he sees as the failure of President Biden's border policies. Ron DeSantis is making this a referendum on the Biden administration. And even leftist political commentators say that if this is indeed a referendum on President Biden, the Democrats are going to lose. So at least DeSantis is doing what perhaps will be successful in the election. The problem with it is, what's he going to do after the election? This is a big political game. Both sides are in it. Both sides are benefited by political success, whether that success has anything to do with the people of the United States or not. And so what we have to do is we have to be smarter than the political process. I wonder if Americans can. I wonder if we can be. Crist is a 3-term Democrat congressman from St. Petersburg, a former Republican governor of Florida. He is a practiced debater, making his 7th statewide run for office. DeSantis is seeking a 2nd term as governor of the state of Florida, defended his record. Here are 5 takeaways according to USA Today. And remember, all of this is biased. Once again, they start with abortion. That's not the issue. It's like number 4. So Crist has tried to make the governor's race a referendum on abortion rights. I would like to see everybody have a shot. I'm proud of the 15 weeks that we did. I know Charlie Crist opposes. This is, by the way, what DeSantis said. I know that Charlie Crist opposes even though the baby is fully formed, has a heartbeat, blah, blah, blah. So they start with that because that's the only card Democrat politicians have to play. Crist said Floridians are being priced out of their state under DeSantis, with housing costs way up, rentals hard to find, and an expected utility rate increase recently postponed by the governor-appointed Public Service Commission until after Election Day. Good luck buying a home. Good luck renting an apartment. It's because Governor DeSantis has taken his eyes off the ball. No, that has nothing to do with it. Has nothing to do with it. Housing prices are out of control because because the government has acted. And that's just the way it is. DeSantis says the economy's just fine. The state's unemployment rate fell to 2.5% last month, the second lowest level ever recorded. By the way, when it comes to buying a house, the problem with buying a house is interest rates. Why are interest rates so high? Because we made a huge mistake in spending $1.9 trillion. That was a bipartisan issue, in case you're wondering. $1.9 trillion. Inflation took off. So we have to get control of that. How do we do that? We raise interest rates so all this money can be soaked up out of the economy by the Fed. That's going to cause a recession. It's going to get worse. And once again, it has nothing to do with Ron DeSantis. The state's unemployment rate, the Florida state unemployment rate, fell to 2.5%, so second lowest level ever recorded. Florida's population continues to swell with new residents and tourists. DeSantis said are attracted by the free state of Florida. He's got a point there. He approved a record $1.3 billion in mostly consumer-oriented tax breaks this year. He kept schools open through most of the pandemic, in contrast to many states that shut down, putting more pressure on families, hurting academics. The governor said that Hurricane Ian added to an already troubled property insurance market, but he defended having pushed for legislative action in May to help prop up the industry, a move he plans to repeat before the end of the year. DeSantis blamed Biden for at least some of the state's problems. I think we have the worst inflation in 40 years. It's much more expensive to replace a roof today than it was 3 years ago. Correct. And by the way, you do know that most roofs are made out of asphalt shingles. What is asphalt made out of? Petroleum. Petroleum prices go through the roof because the United States no longer provides itself enough energy to handle its own business. Worldwide petroleum prices go through the roof. And yeah, asphalt shingles become more expensive. All of it comes right back down to those decisions. Let's see what else. The immigration clash. DeSantis spent $1.5 million in Florida taxpayer money in September to fly 48 Venezuelan asylum seekers from San Antonio to Martha's Vineyard. I thought what the governor did was a horrible political stunt, said Crist. Did somebody ask Charlie Crist, the Democrat, what he thought of the horrible political stunt that President Biden pulled off by doing exactly the same thing? Except in the middle of the night, except with no publicity, except with no telling anybody where they're going to go? No. Why? Well, because nobody in the mainstream media wants to actually get to the story. Voting rights and wrongs. Under DeSantis, Florida imposed new limits on where ballot drop boxes can be located, making it tougher to vote by mail. Right. And thank goodness. Also enhanced penalties potentially facing voter registration organizations. Yeah, because it's a mess. And so there you go. That's part of what that's happening. There's plenty more with regards to elections. We'll get to all of that coming up in just a couple of moments. This is the Wells Report. Back in a second. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Telephone number 817-379-2172. We're in the panic phase of the latest election cycle, 14 days before the election. Mainstream media trying to defend the indefensible because it's become a propaganda game. We're trying to report the news. It's not easy. I pointed out that voting was a mess. And somebody asked, how was voting just a mess? Just curious. Well, police have made one arrest after a canvasser supporting the re-election campaign of Senator Marco Rubio was beaten on the street in Hialeah, Florida. The canvasser was attacked by 4 people over the weekend who supposedly told him Republicans were not allowed in their neighborhood. Quote, last night, one of our canvassers wearing my T-shirt and a Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and a Ron DeSantis hat was brutally attacked by 4 animals who told him Republicans weren't allowed in their neighborhood in Hialeah, Florida. The canvasser suffered internal bleeding, a broken jaw, and will need facial reconstructive surgery, unquote. According to a police report published by local news, one suspect in the attack was identified as Javier Lopez. The report said Lopez allegedly was blocking the sidewalk while the canvasser was trying to pass by. The canvasser then tried to walk toward the other side of the street to get around him when Lopez allegedly said, quote, you can't pass by here, this is my neighborhood. The victim pointed out that it was public property. He could be there. An argument ensued. Lopez rushed at the canvasser, grabbed him, and slammed him to the ground. A third party intervened at one point and kicked Lopez in the face before escaping. The report said Lopez then continued attacking the canvasser by punching him in the face repeatedly. The canvasser suffered severe swelling in his face. His right eye swelled shut, severe swelling and bleeding from his mouth. We're going to allow detectives to conduct their own investigation and come to the conclusion whether it was hate motivated or politically motivated, said Hialeah Police Sergeant Jose Torres. Fox News reached out to the Hialeah Police Department for more information. It's awaiting a response. Hialeah is a city in South Florida's Miami-Dade County with a population of more than 236,000 people. Its mayor, Esteban Bovo, is a Republican. Bovo told Fox News he spoke to the canvasser's father. The canvasser's condition is improving. He also said the investigation is looking at others that may have participated. As far as whether the attack was politically motivated, Bovo said he did not want to jump to conclusions. But we do know the facts, he added. He was wearing a Rubio T-shirt, had a DeSantis hat on. He was canvassing and was beaten severely. The canvasser, identified by WSVN and other local media as Christopher Monzon, had been connected to, this is great, white nationalist causes. Really? How is he connected? Rubio is in the middle of a tight race against Democrat Representative Val Demings, who's a former chief of police in Orlando. Campaign spoke out against the attack. Quote, Chief Demings strongly condemns all act of violence. The attacker should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Campaign volunteers deserve to feel safe in every neighborhood. We're praying for a speedy recovery for the canvasser who was attacked last night. That is how voting is a mess. That's how voting is a mess, in case you're wondering. As far as other issues, voting law changes, I don't know why there were voting law changes. The 2020 election was perfect. Ask anyone. Why did they change all the laws? I'll tell you why. Because there's a huge problem with voting in the nation. It's a mess. Are you beginning to catch on? There's more. It's coming up in just a couple of seconds, including the incredulous story from a journalist regarding Palm Beach County gaining independent voters. Why is that important? Stick around and find out. This is the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. We're bringing you the news, and it's all about the elections. Good heavens to Betsy. There's so many people panicking about so many different things. We're going to cover most of them. It's outrageous. It's outrageous. And by the way, I have a solution to this problem. You know, the Wells Report is about truth and solutions, right? Here's the truth. The mainstream media has lost its flipping mind because there are 14 days left in the election. They're trying to get Democrats elected because they're biased. So that's the problem. What is the solution? Here's the solution. Pay close attention now. Vote early at a polling place. Vote at a polling place. Don't mail it in. Vote at a polling place. And stop watching the news. I'm telling you, just come here. What I will do is I'll give you all the news you need to know. All right? And you need to know some of this election news. You do. Because it's interesting to see how many people are losing their collective minds over things right now. It's amazing, actually. So let's get to some of them. Here's one. So what people are understanding and beginning to realize, Stephanie Mattot from the Palm Beach Post has pointed out that, you know, there are an awful lot more independent voters in Palm Beach County than there have been. I mean, Democrats are losing voters, 27,000 of them. Republicans lost 130 voters. Meanwhile, no party affiliation, those voters who say no party affiliation, have grown by 32,000 in one county. As of September 21st, Democrats still lead Palm Beach County in voter registrations with 398,703. More significantly, NPA voters rank second before Republicans with 289,036. Why is that? I'll tell you why. Because this long Democrat bastion is losing their credibility. The Democrat Party is losing their credibility in this county. Why? Because things are screwing up. That's why. Well, you'd think Republicans would get more voter registration. No, Republicans are screwing up. The government is screwing up. And people who are independent are saying, you know, I'm just going to wait until I have some idea of what's next before I start talking about how Republicans are great and Democrats are awful, or Republicans are terrible and Democrats are great. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to watch and see what I can figure out. Political consultant Richard Giorgio said the growth in independent voters, especially in Florida's larger urban counties, isn't novel. Giorgio, who has advised a multitude of Palm Beach County candidates over the years, said the major parties have reached a saturation point and they have simply irked voters. I think people are clearly frustrated with both parties. They are. And they should be. It's nuts. And speaking of nuts, Hillary Clinton is back in the news. Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton is accusing Republicans of plotting to steal the next presidential election. Her 2016 White House hopes were dashed by former President Donald Trump. She made the accusation last week in a promotional video for the progressive advocacy group Indivisible. Quote, right-wing extremists already have a plan to literally steal the next presidential election, and they're not making a secret of it. The right-wing controlled Supreme Court may be poised to rule on giving state legislature the power to overturn presidential elections. No. The Supreme Court is poised to give the states control of the elections instead of the federal government. In fact, the Supreme Court is hearing a case that could give state legislatures more power in regulating federal elections. The case, Moore versus Harper, stems from a lawsuit by GOP-controlled North Carolina Assembly over the state court's invalidation of congressional redistricting. North Carolina lawmakers argue the U.S. Constitution gives sole authority to regulate federal elections to state legislatures without oversight by the state courts or state constitutions. Clinton alleges if the Supreme Court rules in favor of North Carolina, the 2024 presidential election could be decided by Republican-controlled state legislatures. Is that not the way it's supposed to be? You see, if there's a political party that gets more votes than you, then they're in control of the redistricting process every 10 years during the census years. If you don't want the Republicans to have political power, perhaps you should serve the people better instead of serving yourself. Ms. Clinton, Ms. Secretary, I'm just saying. The former Secretary of State is teaming up with Indivisible to flip several state legislatures to prevent such an outcome. Well, good luck with that. Good luck with that. I'm really interested in what kind of political argument you're going to make to get state legislatures to start following Democrat governmental principles. I'm really interested in that. What are they going to say? Yeah, we're going to, thanks to your trillions and trillions of dollars of tax money, we're going to control the weather and we're going to stop it from being too warm. Oh, really? Yeah, thanks to the ability to spend money hand over fist, what we're going to do is we're going to create inflation to make everything more expensive. Well, they've done that. Sure have done a great job of that. Oh, yeah. She suggested in 2019, she suggested the White House race was stolen from her. Oh, no. That's only President Trump. Only President Trump talks about how elections were stolen. I think it's also critical to understand, as I've been telling candidates who've come to see me, you run the best campaign. You can even become the nominee. You can have an election stolen from you. Okay. So that's Hillary Clinton. But wait, there's more from the distaff Democrat lobby. Democrat leader Nancy Pelosi, the Democrat from California, expressed disbelief that anybody would vote for Republicans. This is in an interview with the New York Times. The paper pressed Pelosi on troubling data for Democrats this November, but Pelosi, quote, rejects the suggestion that late-breaking trends seem to favor Republicans. Part of it is I can't believe anybody would vote for these people, she said, before bashing Republican campaign strategy as endless lying and endless money. Oh, really? In recent media interviews, Pelosi has spurned polls showing GOP-favored issues like the economy and crime are what voters care about the most. Pelosi argued last week on MSNBC abortion rights were still a top concern for the majority of women and independents. To the Times, Pelosi's also, quote, disputed the idea that abortion was fading as a driving issue. She said to Republicans, you think that. You go think that. I can tell you it's not in the rearview mirror. Record high inflation, gas prices have made the economy the number one issue for the majority of voters. While the Supreme Court's Dobbs decision made abortion a higher priority among some voters, Republicans have gained back the edge they had months ago, leading by 2.2% on average, according to Real Clear Politics. Don't get me wrong. Don't get me started about polling. Pelosi urged Democrats to change the subject, dismissing inflation as a global phenomenon. I want to point out something nobody's pointed out when it comes to global inflation. You see, when the United States economy reacts in an economic way, it affects the entire planet. It does. They used to say when the American economy sneezed, the European and Pacific Rim economies caught pneumonia. It's true. People are saying that Pelosi is delusional. Yeah, maybe. Maybe. It could be true. Anyway, that's Hillary Clinton, Nancy Pelosi. Let's get down to, say, Stacey Abrams. Speaking of elections and being stolen. Okay. Stacey Abrams is now doubling down on Jim Crow 2.0. Excuse me. She is doubling down on Jim Crow 2.0. Why? Well, because all of the voting numbers in Georgia, excuse me, sorry, here, let me drink some of this tequila. Agave. Ask for it by name. Anyway, what was I saying? Oh, yeah. What you have here is you have a situation where there is more voting taking place now than ever has before in Georgia, where Stacey Abrams is running for governor again. Meanwhile, she's saying that there's voter suppression, which is what Jim Crow laws were all about. It's just not real. And so once again, politicians are losing their minds. Nancy Pelosi saying, why would anybody want to vote for a Republican? Well, that's because we have to actually pay $5 for a gallon of gas. And I know that's no big deal for you because you pay $25 for a pint of ice cream, Madam Speaker. But at the end of the day, you are so detached from the American people, you're becoming irrelevant. Same thing with Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton is accusing the right wing of plotting to steal the 2024 election. Really? You're going to put that on the table, are you? Especially in the light of everybody who has problems with the 2020 election getting their butts kicked by a biased mainstream media, the political machine. I mean, in this country, in case you had forgotten, Madam Secretary, we get to say what we want. We get to say what we believe, whether you agree with it or not. And character assassination is ridiculous. Poker Monkey points out that Democrats filibustered the civil rights laws of the 60s. They did. Absolutely, they did. It's all garbage. But what I keep seeing and what all this shows you is these gyrations toward unreality, these shrill, easily disproved lies. They get worse every election. And many of them are sustained by a mainstream media that's playing ball. This is bad. This is bad. It's also why I do this broadcast. Yeah. So let's talk about something else. We're going to get to this in just a couple of minutes. So there are a lot of people that deny the 2020 election. 538 is pointing out something regarding the 300 or so candidates that are election deniers, as reported. They just don't agree with the 2020 election. That's what they're saying. You're going to be amazed at what 538 says about all these candidates. That's coming up next segment. It's hard to sift through all of this stuff every day. It's hard to see the nonstop character assassination of people that disagree with you politically. It's hard to see people trading on division, like Stacey Abrams, trying to inflame a voter base that inflammation caused by being aggrieved. You're being kept from the polls. No, you're not. And by the way, you're voting in record numbers. Why would she say something like that? Because she doesn't have anything else to say. That's why. And why doesn't she have anything else to say? Because political parties have backed themselves into a corner to the point where they have to deny reality in order to somehow stand for the political decisions that have brought us to the point where people just simply are not buying their message. A two-party system works fine when there's a free press. We don't have a free press. The two-party political system works fine when those parties are adversarial. They are not. The people of the United States have to do better. I hope they will. This is the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Thanks very much for being with us today. If you find take two. If you find value in this broadcast, and probably not after my inability to speak English there for a moment, if you find value in this broadcast, please subscribe, pass it along to your friends. Please do. As a matter of fact, subscribe, pass it along to your friends, and give us a thumbs up. That'd be really, really nice. If you want to support the show financially, please do. Go to patreon.com/The Wells Report. patreon.com/The Wells Report. You can throw $1 at me. Mike Renwee threw $3 at me the other day. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. So it's like a month. Okay? A month. It's $1 a month. That's all it takes. If you can do that, I sure would appreciate it. Thank you. Now, let's talk a little bit about this. So, the prevailing idea among the media is that anybody who distrusts the 2020 election is obviously mentally defective in some way. And what's interesting about this election is there are like 300 candidates scattered across the country who have campaigned on the premise that the 2020 election was bogus. So you would think that what we have now is we now have an opportunity to see whether or not the idea as a political issue that the 2020 election was fraudulent in some way, shape, or form. We have a way to find that out because these candidates, if it was as called the very most secure, best election ever, they'll all lose, right? Well, according to 538, in May, Anna Paulina Luna donned a red carpet-worthy ball gown, to the screening of 2,000 Mules. It's called a debunked documentary that falsely claims to show evidence of widespread voter fraud in the 2020 election. In June, she made her stance on the 2020 election clear in an interview with MSNBC. Quote, "I believe President Trump won that election. I do believe that voter fraud occurred," unquote. In November, she will very likely be elected to Congress. She's the Republican candidate for the Florida's 13th district on the Gulf Coast around St. Petersburg. During redistricting last year, Republicans redrew this previously competitive district to be much redder. As a result, Luna has a 97 in 100 shot of beating her Democrat opponent. This according to 538's deluxe forecast. That's of yesterday at 12 Eastern time. Okay? She is one of well of over 100 candidates running this fall who have denied the legitimacy of the 2020 elections have a strong chance of winning the race. Of the 185 candidates running for the House, Senate, and governor seats who have denied the legitimacy of the 2020 election, 67% are in races forecast currently pins solid Republican. In other words, they're very likely going to win. Overall, a bigger share of the election deniers are running in solid R races than Republicans in candidates in general. Of the 496 Republican candidates running for the House, Senate, and governor, 225, nearly half, are in solid R races. Election-denying candidates running to become House representatives are faring better than those running to be governor or senator. There are 170 election deniers running for House seats. 70% are running in solid R races. In other words, these people are going to win. What does that mean? What does it mean? What does it mean that election deniers are very likely going to win? Well, what it means is that there are too many questions left unanswered by everything that has occurred regarding the 2020 election. That is the problem with the election. It's not who got elected in the 2020 election. It's not who is aggrieved and thinking that they lost the election because of theft. That's not the problem. The problem is that there are a lot of people in the United States of America who believe the 2020 election was bogus in some way, shape, or form. That is the problem. And why do they believe that the election is bogus? Because our political leaders did not demand that all the questions that were asked about the 2020 election were actually investigated and answered. That's why. In my particular case, I really don't care. I don't care who won the 2020 election or lost the 2020 election. The thing that I care about the most is we don't know whether it was a legitimate election. We don't know. And we don't know because we didn't do the proper investigation. And say, well, wait a minute, all those votes were recounted and recounted and recounted. Yeah. How did they become votes in the first place? How did those votes become votes? How did they get put into ballot boxes? How did that happen? See, we haven't done that yet, have we? And that's why people don't believe in the 2020 election. And that's the mistake. We should have gone through it with a fine-tooth comb. Both parties should have said immediately, let's find out. And they did not. This is the Wells Report. Back with the third hour in just a moment. Okie dokie. Back in just a moment. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings. My name is John David Wells. We report the news here, the real news, honestly. We take the propaganda that is foisted upon us every single day by the mainstream media and we try to turn it back into news, try to bring you the facts. We report the news, we analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out both. I make commentary. It's essential. It's essential because I'm a guy who believes in the Constitution of the United States. I don't believe in the Republican version of the Constitution. I don't believe in the Democrat version of the Constitution. I believe in the American version of the Constitution. And so when you hear me discuss any of this stuff during the commentary, which, by the way, is not news, I point out the difference between my opinion and the news. You get to debate. And you can do that by calling me at 817-379-2172. Or you can join the chat room, which is humming today. I love the fact that independents usually go right on the economy. I'm pretty sure that they will be voting Republican along with larger percentages of blacks and Hispanics. Hello, Red Wave, says Poker Monkey. Please explain how Republicans picked up the seat in the House and Senate, but there was fraud. That's nonsensical because the Senate and the House of Representatives are in Democrat hands, as is the presidency. Gary, please vote Republican. A vote of conscience is really a vote for Democrats. Vote for who can at least win the House back. Well, that's partisan. I get that, but it's partisan. Prepared to take all day to vote. Polls may be overwhelmed this round. Yep. Yeah, I would. I'm going to vote. I'm going to vote early here, mainly because I'm tired of this, man. And by the way, I pointed this out. The solution to all of this gobbledygooky and propagandized news of a political nature, which is propaganda, of course, is to vote and then ignore it. And I realize, John, you're inviting people to stop paying attention to what you're doing. Correct. Why? I'll tell you why. Because the mainstream media needs to learn something about this entire mess that they have created or at least perpetuate. And they're beginning to get the message. They're beginning to get the message. That's what we're going to discuss this hour. How these pundits and how these supposed news organizations are suddenly realizing this isn't working. Let me give you an example of a terribly biased piece by John Wood. Now, it's terribly biased because it's USA Today. Okay, but just bear with this. Predicated on a desire to counter hate-fueled violence and division in American society, President Joe Biden's United We Stand Summit produced meaningful moments in the service of unity last month at the White House. Respectfully, John, was that after he called everybody who was a MAGA Republican a fascist? Is that what you're discussing? Anyway, I just got to point that out, okay? And that was an opinion. The event's proximity to the midterm elections, the president's at times divisive rhetoric underscore the dangers of politicizing unity itself, which is exactly what Joe Biden was doing with the United We Stand summit. 2 weeks before the White House summit, Biden spoke in Philadelphia about threats to American democracy. Democracy endures only if we, the people, respect the guardrails of the republic. Only if we, the people, accept the results of free and fair elections. Only if we, the people, see politics not as total war, but mediation of differences. Democracy cannot survive when one side believes there are only two outcomes in an election. Either they win or they were cheated. Again, respectfully, Mr. President, those are very, very fine words in a vacuum, but they're not real. They're simply not real. Hillary Clinton disputed the 2016 election. Stacey Abrams disputed her first gubernatorial election. Yes, Donald Trump disputes the 2020 election. And there are like 300 candidates that also dispute the 2020 election. They're probably going to get elected. What does that tell you about the 2020 election? We did not answer the questions that lead to the skepticism about the election. When Donald Trump pointed out these amazing blips in these voters, these amazing straight line curves where Biden voters suddenly appeared out of nowhere in the middle of the night, Joe Biden should have said, you know what? I agree with President Trump. I think what we should do is I think we should stop this for right this minute and go and get to the bottom of that. I want to find out how that happened. But he didn't do it. Why? Because winning was more important than what he talks about when he says democracy only endures only if people respect results of free and fair elections. In order for people to respect free and fair elections, they have to be free and fair. And I'm not going to say one way or another. I'm just going to ask a question. Do you believe the 2020 election was free and fair? Yes or no, and why? Regardless of how many people don't think it was free and fair, that there are people that don't think it's free and fair, and they're on both sides of the political spectrum, they need to have their day. That is way too many. And we have to get to the bottom of this. And we haven't. That's why people don't trust the election. And so Biden's speech was meant to summon Americans' conscience in the continued battle for the soul of the nation. With the use of such language, the president cast the battle in metaphysical terms. He isn't wrong to do so. The Union stands in a perilous moment. It does not. The Democrat translation of the Republic and the Union stands in a perilous moment. There's a difference there. It's a moment in which the temptation to succumb to the worst impulses of rage and tribalism threatens to unravel the American project itself. That's an overstatement. That's an overstatement. That's not true. Remember, these people deal with a bubble that they're in. That's all they deal with. I was talking to a friend of mine about how things are getting worse and worse and worse. Not true. Things are about the same. All of this is about the same. All of these debates and things are the same. President Nixon famously said that John Kennedy and the Democrats stole the 1960 election. The difference? The difference is that we had 3 or 4 sources of news in those times. Now we have hundreds, including this one. The word gets around now. More people are saying very shrill things. The mainstream media has decided that those shrill things are worthy of news reporting, instead of actually trying to determine whether they do or don't have anything to do with reality. That's what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to bring reality into this. Not easy. It's pervasive. This is mainly a discussion of what actually is, as opposed to what is being told to us as gospel. But John Wood is on the right track here. To heal America, we need a generosity and courage of spirit that is incompatible with a notion of total war in our politics. Yet the president made it clear in the same speech he believes there is an enemy in American politics that must be identified, rooted out, and defeated, and he called them MAGA Republicans. MAGA, Make America Great Again, according to Joe Biden, is the problem. Okay, does that mean he doesn't want to make America great again? Why hasn't anybody brought that up? I think that's a hell of a question. I sure would like him to answer it. I'd like anybody to answer it. What's wrong with making America great again? 40-year high inflation? The political parties at each other's throats? Don't you think it would be a good idea to try to, I don't know, make America great again? See, I think it is. I think that's a good idea. And in order to do that, we've got to get to the bottom of all of this electioneering. So the president is talking about unity, and then he talks about how there is an enemy in American politics called MAGA Republicans. 74 million of us. Called racists. Called domestic terrorists by this same president. Donald Trump and MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic, said Biden. Okay, tell me about the squad. Would you say that they're extremists? I sure as hell would. What about all these leftist progressives? Not necessarily the squad, but certainly in league with them. And by the way, there are Republicans and Democrats in that group. What about those people? They're extremists. Do they represent a problem? Hell yes, they do. Which takes me back to the American idea of the Constitution of the United States, etc. The president went on to say in this unity summit that MAGA Republicans do not respect the Constitution. Joe Biden does. They do not believe in the rule of law. Do Democrats respect the rule of law? They do not recognize the will of the people. Do Democrats recognize the will of the people? If so, why are they trying to make your car illegal? And then the president said MAGA Republicans have made their choice. They embrace anger. They thrive on chaos. They live not in the light of truth, but in the shadow of lies. I'll ask a simple question. Who's lying here? You tell me. I'm not going to tell you. You tell me. John Wood continues, Biden faces a difficult political challenge, a visceral concern over the near future of democracy because of the willingness of former President Trump and his allies to bend the law and the truth in their efforts to undo the results of the 2020 election. Once again, it comes down to the people voting. The people that are voting in these elections can certainly say that the 2020 election was just fine by defeating all of the hundreds of candidates who are running on the idea that the 2020 election was not free and fair. I wonder if they will. Biden's words make it easy for Republicans in general and Trump voters in particular to feel that they are the personal targets of the president's moral outrage and to fear possible consequences from the Biden administration in this polarized age. What do you mean, John? Are you talking about the DOJ and the FBI stomping on people, parents at school board meetings? Is that what you're talking about? This is the Wells Report. Back in a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. Thanks for being with us today. If you find value in this show, please subscribe to it in any platform you happen to be watching it on. Share it with your friends. Give us a thumbs up when you can. If you'd like to support the show financially, go to patreon.com/The Wells Report and give us $1 a month. That's all it takes. $1 a month would be great. And we hope that you find value in this broadcast. Let's move on. We're talking about a John Woods piece in USA Today. It's biased, and it seeks to try to point out the foibles in President Biden's logic when it comes to the United America Summit. And how the President of the United States essentially labeled MAGA Republicans as enemies of the people. Now, President Biden then tried to say that he was talking about a faction of the GOP. I want to be very clear, he said, very clear up front. Not every Republican, not even the majority of Republicans are MAGA Republicans. Well, what's a MAGA Republican? The guy who came up with Make America Great Again, MAGA, is Donald Trump. 74 million people voted for Donald Trump in the 2020 election. 74 million. That's the highest number of votes ever given a sitting president in a re-election campaign. 74 million. Those are MAGA Republicans. And you said that we were fascists. It's not a faction of the Republican Party. It is a majority of the Republican Party. And that is the stone truth of it all. So when Ben Shapiro, as pointed out in this column, characterized Biden's MAGA Republican rhetoric in terms that veered toward intellectual dishonesty, Shapiro accused the president of labeling, quote, half the American public as the enemy and giving a vicious speech targeting half of Americans. And then that's where John Woods points out the president was talking about a faction of the GOP. He's not. It's not a faction of the GOP. It's the majority. Nobody has ever voted that much for a Republican president ever. But what happens here, and I don't want to lose this point. He says, this is John Woods here, that the idea that was first put forward, at least in this context, by Martin Luther King, he said that we do not seek to defeat or humiliate our opponent, but to win his friendship and understanding. You can't do that by calling your political opponents fascists and enemies. And that's what the president has done. The United We Stand Summit was a brave idea that was poisoned by hysterical partisan rhetoric. And all of these wonderful philosophical things, and you can read this for yourself in USA Today, all these wonderful philosophical things are simply disconnected from the reality as given to us by the President of the United States and the Democrat Party. It's as simple as that. The Democrat Party is, to use the words of John Woods, intellectually dishonest. And the people of the United States know it. In order to get away from this brinksmanship policy, this idea that your political enemies are enemies, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to come up with better policy instead of harsh rhetoric about your political opponents. And better policy is not what we have now in power in the United States. Just the opposite, actually. This is the Wells Report, back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Thanks very much for being with us today. We're talking about the hysteria as we close in on the 2020 election in 14 days. It is ever thus. The Republican Party is essentially standing there with a very strong hand. The Democrat Party is panicking. The mainstream media, being the propaganda wing of the Democrat Party, is also panicking. It's pervasive throughout all the news coverage that you're going to see. And as much as I'd like to be talking about something else, this is the news of the day, and that's what we're talking about. So what I've been saying is in this particular hour, I've noticed that there are an awful lot of pundits and an awful lot of people realizing that everything we've seen regarding the vilification of the Democrat political opponent is not working. If anything, it's working at cross purposes to what they're trying to get done, which is to maintain power in Washington, D.C. I doubt very sincerely that that's going to happen. Moreover, I don't see anything the Democrat Party is doing that is worthy of maintaining their power. And if, by the way, you are a Democrat and you feel differently, call me on the telephone, 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Give me a call. Tell me what the Democrats have done that is worthy of them remaining in power. Okay? That's what I'm interested in. The latest plea for voters is a plea for Generation Z. Okay? As Generation Z, we're told we will fix everything. Voting in the midterms is the first step, says Mariana Pecora, Samantha Bernstein, and Raghav Joshi. In just 2 weeks, the future of our country and planet will be decided in the midterm elections. The stakes are incredibly high for all Americans, but especially for Generation Z, born between 1997 and 2012. It just so happens the youth vote will be a deciding factor in this cycle. The three of us, the people who wrote this, know that to be true, not only because we're a part of Generation Z, but also because we're united in our mission to give young people a voice in politics as voters of tomorrow. If there's one thing we've learned, it's that young people are eager to make their voices heard this November. In fact, earlier this month, we conducted a national survey, found that 67% of Generation Z voters in swing states are likely or absolutely certain to vote in the midterms. Make no mistake, those are numbers that, if translated to the ballot box, could mark a record-breaking youth turnout. But we're not stopping there because we aren't taking anything for granted. Our generation simply has too much on the line for a third of us to sit this out. It's personal to us and to you and to every person in America. Okay? So then there's this wonderful story about this saying, I was 12 years old when Donald Trump announced his candidacy for president by saying people like my Mexican family were rapists. Well, only if they were ignoring American law, crossing the border illegally, and, oh, by the way, rapists. See, this is a propaganda piece. This is a propaganda piece trying to motivate Generation Z voters to vote in the elections. Why? Well, because according to these people, the entire world is on the line. Well, climate change is a hoax. It's ridiculous. And even if it wasn't a hoax, politicians do not have what it takes to be able to do anything about it. They're using it as a fundraising scheme. It's worldwide. And it's not working. And so all of this is a predicate. And so once again, they're saying, Generation Z, you got to vote, you got to vote, you got to vote. Here is something that I want to say. Okay? Generation Z, you got to vote, you got to vote, you got to vote. You do. But vote for the right reasons. If you happen to believe that climate change is going to kill you in 10 years, vote your conscience. By all means, vote your conscience. And I'll see you 10 years from now and a few $1 trillion of tax money wasted and say, So, how's that climate change thing working for you? This is the learning process. The left is adept at taking advantage of the youth vote. They're very, very good at propagandizing the youth to believe something that is something that they're going to find has nothing to do with reality as reality comes to visit them. As these people, I mean, she's in junior high school when Trump was elected. That's not long ago. And she's thinking with, okay, a youthful mind. She hasn't seen the things that the rest of us have seen. She hasn't seen the things that lead me to be on this broadcast nearly every day discussing the problem is politics and the government. Not Democrat politics, not Republican politics, the government. We're electing the wrong people. This is a plea for Generation Z to continue electing the wrong people. Just something you ought to keep in mind. Then there's this, Rex Hupke. I have quoted Rex Hupke a bunch of times, but Rex is realizing that polling is not doing us any good. As we near the midterm elections, you can't hurl a wasted minute without hitting a largely useless political poll. The candidate's up, the candidate's down. No, wait, it's the other way around. Nice phrase. It even rhymed. You'd be better off using a fishbowl as a crystal ball and calling yourself a soothsayer. I can already hear people muttering, did this guy just criticize America's favorite pastime? It's what's more patriotic than trying to predict the outcome of an election? Nearly everything. I'm not trying to predict outcomes of elections. I'm trying to point out the mainstream media trying to coerce people into believing things that are untrue for the sake of this election. Polls are a waste of our time, and too many in this country are addicted to election polling, glued to the tiniest fluctuations of red lines and blue lines, and whatever line represents independent voters. Midterms show we're polling addicts. We should really stop. Well, we are not addicted to polls. You are, Rex. It's your job. I'm just an observer. I'm an observer and a reporter. Emotional roller coasters that Rex points out. Democrats are going to win everywhere. 1 week later, Republicans have a clear advantage. Looks like a red wave. We have no idea what's happening. Right. Consider the brain-scrambling nature of these evolving headlines from the polling company Morning Consult. June 27th, Democrat voters' enthusiasm for midterms spikes in wake of Supreme Court abortion ruling. August 3rd, Democrats in Congress have started to win back voter trust. August 16th, anger helped Democrats flip the House in 2018, but ahead of the 2020 midterms, both sides are equally enraged. September 6th, Democrats are outpacing Biden standing ahead of the midterms. Will it last? And now Morning Consult has this headline. Democrats narrowly lead on the generic ballot. Sunday, the Washington Post said Democrats fear the midterm map is slipping away. CNBC yesterday, Republicans gaining key states signal bad news for Democrats ahead of the midterms. While all that was going on, Republicans said polls showing Democrats leading were undercounting Republicans. Democrats said polls showing Republicans leading were overcounting Republicans. On and on and on and on and on. He's right. This is a game. It's stupid. It's hurting us. This is what happens when hysteria takes the place of reasoned debate. This is what happens when we turn away from the idea of not defeating, demoralizing, humiliating our political opponents, but to seek dialogue and understanding. The problem is that there are an awful lot of real results currently in play with regard to the current political circumstance that put Democrats in a very bad light, and they're probably going to pay for it. There are other problems too. The Democrat Party snuggling up to socialism in 2020 and 2016. was incredibly damaging to their party. This idea that people can listen to politicians talk about how the weather is going to kill us and say that they have the answer, but in order to do that, you've got to drive an electric car. It's preposterous. They say that we have to go through a transition period to change our economy from an oil-based economy, a fossil fuels-based economy, to a green economy. When everyone knows there simply isn't enough energy in the green energy economy to fulfill the basic needs of the United States. The perfect example, California saying we're going to illegalize gasoline-powered cars by 2035, or is it 2025? And then saying you can't charge your car because it's too hot. It's not ready. All of these things are showing us that these policies are intellectually bankrupt. And the Democrat Party is going to pay for it. And they should. They should. It was a wonderful idea. It was a wonderful idea to have the United States of America energy independent for the first time in my lifetime. It was wonderful. Gas was at a reasonable price. Politics change, policies change, and gas is $5 a gallon. What are we doing? Well, we're collecting an awful lot of federal tax money because prices are up on everything. The president who said, I'm not going to raise the middle class taxes. No, what you're going to do is you're going to make prices so high that tax money goes up conversely with high prices, because the more you pay for something, the more tax money is collected, and the more tax money is collected, et cetera, et cetera. That was a tax increase. I said so at the time. I've seen it before. Generation Z voters, they haven't seen it before. They haven't even made the connection yet. They're so worried about that cloud over there trying to kill them, they can only think about climate policy and all this other leftist gobbledygook. It's not real. Which brings us to the point of all this. What we see now, and what we have seen in this entire campaign season, is a willingness to abandon reality for the sake of the political imperative. And reality will always win. Every single time. And it will cost us dramatically, just like it has. You know, people say, well, Donald Trump put a whole bunch of money into the economy. Right. Yeah. Was it a mistake then? Probably. But to follow all that spending with even more spending in the trillions of dollars was absolutely a mistake. And that was a mistake made by President Biden, just like the Democrats did when President Obama was elected. In a blue wave, $5.5 trillion worth of spending. The spending that Donald Trump did, by and large, because we're in the middle of just an unbelievably stupid political handling of COVID-19. What he tried to do is he tried to float the economy for a year or two, and he was successful. But floating it for a year after that, 4 and 5 and 6 years, with nearly another $1 trillion thrown in on top of all of that, making $2.6 trillion. Well, that's changing the economy for the worse. And the only remedy is to force the entire economy into a recession, which is happening. None of this is real. The idea that you can simply stop producing American energy and switch everybody over to electric cars or windmill power or any of that stuff. It's just intellectually bogus, and will be intellectually bogus for at least 50 years. 50. The technology required for this green revolution does not exist yet. But instead of working on pushing that technology, they're forcing electric cars and taxes down our throats. That's not governance. That's manipulation. And like I said earlier, that manipulation gets worse every single election. And we, the people, have to stop it. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. We were just talking about the government doing its dead level best to buy as many votes as humanly possible. The President of the United States came up with this wonderful idea, and that was a program to forgive student loan debt. As I expected, the entire plan ended up in the courts with a federal appeals court saying, no, we're not moving forward with that yet. We first got to find out whether it's constitutional, which it is not. The Congress can only the Congress can spend that money. A president can't do it. And so the entire idea is mired in legal limbo. And so what happens? Well, as the federal government fights with states and other groups over the student loan debt forgiveness plan, the education department said it would make permanent some temporary changes to a program that makes it easier for people working as teachers, public defenders, other public sector workers to have their student loan debt forgiven. Loan forgiveness for these workers has been available for years, but few people have been able to use the option because of complex rules about eligibility. So they're simply changing the rules in order to make it happen. This is inflationary, which proves what? This proves that the Biden administration and the left at large don't learn from their mistakes. They don't learn. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to work any magic possible to get as many people as possible an opportunity to say, gosh, that was a good thing. I think I'll vote Democrat. I don't think it'll work. As a matter of fact, I think it's going to harm everybody. And they need to stop. They need to stop trying to buy votes. They need to earn them. Don't you think? Finally, on the Wells Report today, something very interesting happened. It appears as though Governor DeSantis went to a Green Bay Packers game. He went with Tim Michels, the Republican nominee for governor in Wisconsin. Michels told a gathering at the Lake County Patriots, a far-right group, last Thursday at a brewery in Oconomowoc, Wisconsin. Don't laugh at me. You try saying it. Anyway, he explained that DeSantis had never been to Lambeau Field, the historic stadium where Packers play their home games, wanted to attend a game there. We're watching the game. All of a sudden, I look over, and Ron DeSantis is texting. And he asks, how do you spell Lambeau? Lambeau. Curly Lambeau is who the stadium's named after. Michels told the gathering at the rally, according to the New York Times, I say, who are you texting with? He says, I'm texting with Tom Brady. The governor of Florida gets to text with Tom Brady. Well, the New York Times happened to be at this particular gathering. They were denied entry to the publicly advertised event, but they got a recording of Mr. Michels' remarks anyway. And now what they're trying to do is they're trying to figure out what Brady and DeSantis are talking about. Reported by the Post staff, I guess that's not the Washington Post, but it could be. I think it's the Tampa Bay Post. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and Tom Brady are texting each other, but they're not talking about it. And they want to know why. What are Tom Brady and Ron DeSantis talking about? I have an answer to that question. Here it is. Nunya. That's it. Nunya. As in, none your business. It's not any of your business who Ron DeSantis is talking with. It's none of your business whether Tom Brady is texting Ron DeSantis. They go into this long thing about, Tom Brady's played golf with Donald Trump a lot, and he had a Make America Great Again hat in his locker, 2015. He was a Trump supporter, but then again, so was his owner, Mr. Kraft, who owns the New England Patriots, who Tom Brady was playing for at the time. It's like, are you crazy? Are you nuts? But this is what's going on here. This is what's taken the place of news. This is what's taken the place of journalism. Now we're trying to figure out why it is the Florida governor is texting with an NFL quarterback. Again, the answer is Nunya. Nunya business. Why is this national news? Because it's 14 days before an election. That's why. It's going to be a watershed event in the American lexicon, no matter who wins. No matter who wins this election. Either way, the republic will change. The question is, will that change be good in your mind or bad? The Zen Master always has the right answer. We'll see. We'll see. This is the Wells Report. By the way, I often say that I do this show every day, Monday through Friday. Well, this week is a little bit of an exception. I have some state guard duty that I have to perform, and I will not be able to be on the air Thursday or Friday. More about that coming up in tomorrow's edition of the Wells Report. I certainly hope I see you there. God bless all y'all. Have a nice evening. And so we come to the end of another broadcast. And I sincerely appreciate all of you folks that have joined us. And by all means, take good care of yourselves. As I'm often want to do, I am quoting my wife now. Be safe, make good decisions. I love that. Take good care of yourself, and thanks very much for your ears today. Until tomorrow.